Hello and welcome to this edition of Inside Tacoma. I'm your host, Randall Lewis. Our guest for our conversation today is State Representative Steve Kirby. Welcome back.
Well, it's good to be back.
It's been a while since you've been with us. So we have a new set and you have a new look. I mean, people who haven't seen you for a while, you're a lot thinner than you used to be.
Yeah, shout out to my friends at the Multicare Weight Loss and Wellness Program because of them. In the last year, I've lost about 50 pounds, got off of all my medications for my type 2 diabetes, and I don't think I've been this healthy in a long time, and I'm probably the size and shape that I was back in 1977, the first time I ever ran for one of these offices.
Well, there's probably people in Olympia who are sad that you're healthy, healthier than you've ever been, because you have some people, you've frustrated some people in Olympia over the years. You know that. I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah, they've either gotten over it or they're gone now.
All right. And to be honest, for the audience here, you and I go back a long way. Grew up in the same neighborhood, and I think you used to harass me as I walked to school in the morning.
Well, you were younger than you were.
That's right.
You were a grade behind me, and so of course that was sort of my job.
Right. Yes, indeed. So we have known each other a very long time. I covered your career as a reporter at City Hall when you were on the City Council the first time. And then as you moved on in other positions, you've been in Olympia now for how long? When was your first election?
So I've been there 18 years. I'm starting my 10th term in the legislature. I've been term limited off the Tacoma City Council twice,
Right.
Unlike a lot of people. Just, been doing this kind of work for over 40 years now, and kind of getting to the point now where I'm finally getting good at it.
Really good at it.
Yeah.
And people have even stopped running against you. You had no opponent in this election.
Yeah, that happens actually a lot. 8 out of the last 12 times I've run for any office, I haven't had an opponent. I like to think it's because people are happy with the work that I do. It seems to be the case. So I'm going to keep doing it, and until someday it'll be time to take the keys away from Grandpa. But I think we're a ways away from that.
All right, especially as you're getting healthier and healthier as you get older. Okay, that's good to know. So we had a good election for the Democratic Party. Both the House and the Senate increased the majorities of Democrats, which makes it a little easier to get things passed than when you have like a one-vote majority in the two chairs, in the two bodies. So let's talk about what we expect in 2019 with the economy sort of percolating along. A governor, well into his second term, and one-party control of the Washington legislature. What do we expect?
Well, and it's not like me to be a kind of a heavily partisan person. I'm pretty popular over in the other caucus as well as my own, but we really there's been a lot of partisan gridlock for a really long time. So there's a lot of pent-up public policy that needs to get done, and so in fact we've all spent a great deal of time the last couple of months sort of putting together what that's going to mean. So basically we see our side of the aisle as the people. We put the people first, and not so much things that I think have maybe resulted in encouraging that income disparity that I think threatens the middle class. And it's happening. I think it's happened from all across America, but in individual states that can happen as well. So we're going to concentrate, I think, on doing things like improving the accessibility and the affordability of just about everything, because it's kind of gotten to the point now where you almost have to be rich to access things like affordable housing and health care and mental health services, long-term care, education. It's just it's kind of gotten to the point where we've put a price on everything now. We sell everything to people instead of providing it to people, and I think we're going to try and invest in things that make all of those kinds of services the government really should be involved in to make people's lives better. You know, we're not going to be able to change the world, but we can do our part and we can make people's lives better.
All right. Now, you have been chair of a kind of a business-oriented committee in the past. Is that going to continue going forward?
Yes, I'm on the Committee on Committees.
Ah.
And there needs to be such a thing. I need to tell all my friends in the private sector that. You know, I have to almost always have to repeat it. But somebody has to pick who's going to be on every committee, what committees we're going to have, what those committees do, and that sort of thing. And I am on that committee. There are advantages to being a senior member. There are 98 people in the House of Representatives. Exactly 6 of them have been there longer than me now.
Wow.
So, and as you know, it's a kind of a seniority system. That's not everything, you know, it revolves around seniority, but a lot does. So I'm in a position to have a little something to do with, you know, what happens down there. So I have been a part of, you know, putting that all together. One of the advantages of being on the committee that picks committees is I get to be on all the committees I want to be on.
Okay.
And that's not going to change this year from how it's been for the last few years. We did change the name of 2 of the 3 committees. My committee was the Business and Financial Services Committee. It's now called Consumer Protection and Business.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and it's because, you know, basically most of what I do is consumer protection oriented. It has to do with business regulatory authority, everything except labor. Labor has its own committee, so they can fight over that, where I actually can work with businesses and figure out ways to, you know, cut through some of the regulation, but also make sure that our businesses operate in a manner that doesn't hurt people.
Right.
And so that's what I've done down there. I've also served on what's known as the Commerce and Gaming Committee. So basically, those kinds of regulatory laws and bills that will be introduced will go in front of me.
Okay.
So that's what I do more than I do anything else. When you're a committee chair, like I have been for the last 14 years now, one of the longest serving committee chairs in Olympia, you spend about 60% of your time working on things that go through the committee that you chair. And then maybe another 20% on the other 2 committees that you serve on, and that leaves you 20% for everything else. And so that's sort of the life of a legislator, whether they want to admit to it or not. That is how it is. And here in Tacoma, Pierce County, we have a lot of committee chairs serving, and actually can't. I'm about 12 hours away from being able to tell you of some of those things, but I'm here to tell you that the city of Tacoma in particular, but Pierce County is very well represented in Olympia these days.
Right. The other committee you've served a long time on that you didn't mention is Judiciary.
Yes, we've changed the name of that, and I'm sure that I'll remember it
at some point in time.
by the time the legislature starts.
So you know where to show up.
It's the Judiciary Committee with a new name.
With a new name, okay.
We didn't change anything else, just the name, but that's how it works.
I wanted to ask you about that, because you've been on that a long time, whatever it's going to be called. It tends to be a committee that attracts lawyers. I know you're not a lawyer.
No.
But what has been your attraction to being on the Judiciary Committee for all these years?
We need people on the Judiciary Committee who are not lawyers, because there are so many lawyers on it. If you left it up to the lawyers on that committee, in my experience, you couldn't do anything in this state. You know, they want to fix it, so you have to be a lawyer in order to sell a house. You know, I mean, I've seen bills like that. And so you kind of have to be there to point out, you know, maybe we don't have to, you know, do this. And really, you know, it's very helpful to have that. When I first got there were only like 2 lawyers in the whole legislature, and now the whole committee is filled up with them. But we always have to have a few people on that committee who are not lawyers, just to be sure that there's a balance between you know, what we need lawyers for and maybe things that we don't need to be a lawyer in order to do. So I've been doing that for all the time I've been on that's the longest serving member of that committee.
Okay, because I know you have been there a long time, and that's why I wanted to ask what was your attraction to doing that, because it deals with lots of stuff that is very important. There's no getting around. There's a lot of very important issues there. We tend to, as the city, we tend to show up because every once in a while somebody introduces an eminent domain bill, and we have to kind of go in and defend our rights to use something we hardly ever use in practice, but we always want to be able to do it if we need to. And that seems to be the thing that local government shows up most often for in that committee. But
there are and it really is just a way to I love my friends, the lawyers, and I work very well with the legal community. I've actually gotten to the point now where I have to tell people I'm not a lawyer, but I do play one on the Judiciary Committee. And I know way more about the judicial system than probably anybody who's not a lawyer needs to. But by the same token, it really, how that system interacts with people in their everyday lives is really important. And I think that's a perspective that I never lose track of, that sometimes my friends, the lawyers, can kind of lose sight of. And they're doing their job, and I want to help them do their job in a way that helps people. And that really is my attraction to that subject area.
Okay. I want to ask you about somebody who's not from Tacoma, just because it's kind of historic, and we're informed that there will be some change in 2019, and that is Speaker Frank Chopp. He's a legislator from what is often called the most liberal district in the state of Washington, in the heart of Seattle. He's represented that for many, many years, and he's been Speaker of the House of Representatives in the state of Washington longer than any other serving person. And that says a lot, because the 10 speakers in Washington state have tended to serve for a very long time, but Frank's outdone all the previous ones. But he's announced he'll step down at the end of the 2019 session. Still serve out his term, but not as Speaker after this last session. So do we expect that there's going to be lots of political jockeying going on inside your caucus to succeed him?
Well, okay, it depends on what political jockeying means. First of all, no, I have no interest in being the Speaker of the House. I like to lead with that.
Okay.
First, let me just say that I am so fortunate to have been in the legislature. All the time I've been there, Frank Chopp's been Speaker of the House. And, there's a reason for that. And I think that guys like him only come around every now and then. He's that good. I've known a lot of Speakers of the House, and in my 40 years of this kind of work. And, I've just been fortunate to be there while he's there. So it's going to be a huge change, but I think there will be I think we'll transition to a different leader rather than to totally turn everything on its head. I really don't think that'll happen. I really do think that it'll be orderly. The kinds of political jockeying that we're seeing is organized, and I think really well intended. Because there are different ways we can do things, and people have their ideas, and I really do think that my caucus will carefully look at things that we can do different, things that have worked over the years, and I think it'll be a peaceful transition. I really do.
All right. I've enjoyed working with Frank myself, though I have to tell people on the city council frequently that there's pluses and minuses to Mr. Chopp's interest in Tacoma. He has a great deal of interest in Tacoma. I think he's from Bremerton originally. Tacoma appeals to him as kind of the working class city that he grew up in Bremerton, not at all like his district is in Seattle. And so he has interest in the things we've done. And he is actually killed bills that we've introduced at the behalf of the city council over time, which is always tough to explain to the city council. And at other times he's been our champion on things, and sometimes completely unexpectedly been our champion on things. So it's going to be different for Tacoma to have a speaker who's not from Tacoma, but looks out for us,
Sure.
not be there anymore. So
What's not going to change is the fact that we will always have the ear of the speaker as long as I'm there. I'm thinking back to a time that I know you remember when, in my view, the rest of the state ganged up on the city of Tacoma and was going to solve a big problem at the expense of our ratepayers in Tacoma.
Tacoma Power and ratepayers.
And I objected to that, and I think that particularly after that, the speaker's been really attentive to the needs of Tacoma, because I shut that place down for a while.
Yes.
It was quite a story. I've got a bunch of pirate paraphernalia in my office down there now. That was, from back in the day that a particular freshman senator labeled us, oh, those guys are a bunch of pirates, and so of course we embraced that and started wearing eye patches and pirate hats, and it was a great time. But basically the lesson learned there was that it's probably a good idea to be sensitive to the needs of the people and the legislators who represent them.
And that's kind of a lot of insider stuff. But I know people do enjoy the insider parts of how the legislature works, because you do have this kind of intense thing. It's an interesting form of government. City councils meet every week all year long. County councils meet every week all year long. School boards meet a couple times a month all year long. The legislature meets for 105 days in 2019 and is expected to write a $40 billion budget and solve a whole bunch of other problems in 105 days. And the fact that most of the time you do that within that time frame, there are occasional exceptions, is kind of remarkable. And so the attention that people pay for the 105 days you're busy doing that kind of stuff is, I think, worthy, because it's important business that's going on in this kind of unique format that we have that state government is.
Sure, but it's not like we do it all in that 105 days. I mean, I promise you that there are people who have been working on the upcoming budget for ever since we passed the last one.
Of course.
So that's going on all the time. There is, good continuity. We've reappointed the appropriations chair in the House, for example, and I'm not sure what's happening over in the Senate, but my guess is that the leadership of those issues is probably, there's going to be continuity. So the discussions have been ongoing literally since we passed the other budget. And the numbers are what they are, and so we have to do what we have to do. There are forecasts of what our needs are going to be, and forecasts of what kind of what the money will be that we have to address those needs, and so that's really what we have to do. Fortunately, we will not have the partisan gridlock that we have experienced in the past. That doesn't mean it's going to be smooth sailing. I'm a House member for 18 years, and I look over at my friends over across the rotunda, and I like to, the senators sometimes, in my view, seem to think that they're the only ones there. But we can work it out. If we didn't get out of there either on time or even a few days early this time out, I would be shocked, because we've been working on it, and we don't have that partisan divide over what the role of the government is, and so hopefully we'll be able to make investments in things that will help people improve their lives. Again, we're not going to change the world, but we are going to probably do our part, and we're going to try anyway. But we can make people's lives better. And that's all reflected in our budget and the kinds of things that we do. And that's what we think of every minute of every day. All the bills that we pass go into that document. And fortunately, somebody keeps track of all that.
Yeah. Yeah, and the public can too, because the legislature has an absolutely outstanding website for people to track stuff and follow things, and it's just a great source of information in this modern era. I do have to ask you about one policy area, because we had, as I mentioned, the governor was here before. We talked about McCleary, because you've spent a lot of time working on that. It was a major policy bill, and with most major policy bills, the legislature comes back the following year because there's things that just couldn't get done before, or that got done and didn't work out, or a variety of things that you have to do some more attention. We've heard certainly from the Tacoma School District, I know you've heard from the Tacoma School District, that there's some real attention needs to be paid to places like Tacoma. Older, slower growing school districts kind of got the short end of the stick in the formula. And so we expect that you're going to pay attention to the issues, especially because you have you have at least 2 of those school districts, or maybe 3 of them in your district, that have the same problem Tacoma's got with the formula that came out of the first McCleary bill.
Yep, and in fact, it's funny to me because some of my budget people refuse to acknowledge that those problems even exist, and yet they do. So, but I think we really are going to be able to make some progress in that. Basically, the McCleary is not done.
Okay.
We were able to do enough so that it got the Supreme Court to sort of step back, which I think they should have done years ago, but that's just my humble opinion. I think the formula was kind of written in a hurry. It was also written as part of a compromise with the people on the other side of the aisle, on the other side of the rotunda. You can lose a lot in that kind of distance between, the ideas that are generated and how they're actually implemented on the ground. And so I suspect that we will be able to go back. We need to provide some property tax relief. Because there are people that, as a result of what we did, are being taxed out of their homes. Senior citizens in particular, that lived a particular lifestyle. My tax bill is now more than I remember my house payments were, a third of just what my monthly tax bill is now. So, and that's getting worse all the time. And part of it is attributable to how we, work this out. We can kind of just sort of we really can move the deck chairs around, and but the ship isn't sinking.
Right, it's not the Titanic.
We've actually just the deck chairs sometimes do need to be moved around, and so we can do that, and I think we can provide relief to school districts that I think we can call this a bona fide unintended consequence that I think people from outside of the areas, places like Tacoma, really didn't see coming. We tried to tell them, they told us, no, this is going to happen and that's going to happen, and those things didn't happen. Sometimes that works. I tell everybody, you should, sometimes the first couple weeks of the session when we're on the floor are really interesting because, a lot of the bills, the floor speeches start off with, thank you, Mr. Speaker, this bill fixes a problem we created when we passed House Bill such and such 2 years ago, and I think this is, just kind of a larger version of that very same thing. That it happens, and everything doesn't come out exactly the way we had hoped, and fortunately, we can't fix it in a week like I could when I was in local government.
Right.
But we can come right back the next January and be ready to go and fix things that we break. Because that does happen.
Now there's a timing factor though, because school districts by law have to issue contracts and things in May of 1 year for the following year. Your budget will be adopted sometime in April, near your 105th day, it won't go into effect until sometime in July, or actually the 1st of July, it will go into effect. So will you have to do some of this work on this formula as part of a supplemental budget done earlier in the session? Or, I mean, there was even talk of a special session a few months ago to deal with this school problem earlier. And that didn't happen, but is the timing going to have to be a factor for you?
Oh, I'm not sure. I guess I'm going to tell you that I'm not in the best position to know the answer to that. I'm going to start with no. I have to say, and with all due respect to my friends who run these school districts, some of their issues are self-imposed. We sent way more money than they had before. There is no question about that. I think some of these things have to do with school districts doing things with the money, maybe things that we didn't intend for them to do, and they chose to do what they're doing. They may have to put those things back where they belong in the short term and wait until we catch up to a place where we can be helpful. We acknowledge, in fact, in Tacoma, we acknowledge that there were problems with some of the formulas. And we even, we appropriated more money, millions of dollars we gave to Tacoma. And, they're still, that's a kind of a sore subject, and I really don't want to, start, throwing rocks at my friends on the Tacoma School Board, but I think some of their problems were self-imposed. So everybody needs to relax. We all, you can clearly see how much money you have to work with. I understand, how they're looking at it, but there are problems in some of these school districts in terms of how they, what they did with what they had to work with.
Okay.
And so let's just leave it at that.
All right.
And let everybody know we're going to address that. We are not done. Some of the things that we did in order to comply with the court order were things we kind of had to do, sort of with a gun to our head, and that's not always the best way to do it. And so I will acknowledge that we can do better, and we will. I'm certain of it.
All right. And I'd love to ask some more questions, but we are out of time, so we'll have to have you back.
It's always good to be back.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Our guest has been State Representative Steve Kirby. We look forward to seeing you next time here on Inside Tacoma.